Hi guys, and welcome back. In today's video, we will be doing a summary of the first topic of paper 3, which is people and the biosphere. Before we begin, I'd like to thank everyone that has left a comment with feedback on the videos that I have posted so far. It has been pleasing to know that they have been useful and have helped you in the examinations that you have sat so far. I'm currently finishing off revision slides for the other two topics of paper 3 and will upload them soon. Make sure that you subscribe so that you are notified when I post them. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so what and where are the Earth's biomes? And the first thing that I'd like us to look at are the key terms. And the key terms here, the first is biosphere. And this is the living layer of the Earth between the lithosphere and the atmosphere. So this contains all the animals and plants that are on the Earth. Now we know that the plants are referred to as flora and the animals are referred to as fauna. Then biome is one of the large ecosystems that are found on the Earth. So examples here would be the tropical rainforest or the taiga biome. Then we have latitude, and latitude is how far north or south of the equator a place is. Now, when talking about biomes, temperature and rainfall are the most important factors for determining whether plants and animals are going to thrive or not. And this means that latitude is important in determining where the different biomes are found. And this is because latitude determines temperature and rainfall. And we know that for forest biomes to thrive, they will need that temperature and rainfall for the process of photosynthesis so that the plants can actually be able to grow and thrive in that kind of environment. So forest biomes are found in areas of low pressure and high rainfall. And we know from the global atmospheric circulation that those areas that have high rainfall are the ITCZ, which is right here, as you can see at the equator, and that's where you have low pressure. Low pressure means that the air is going to be rising here, and at the equator the air is rising because of the insolation from the sun. So that insolation causes the air to warm up, and as it warms up it becomes less dense and therefore rises. And when it rises it will cool down and condense to form clouds, and that will give you rainfall. And that's why tropical rainforest biomes are found in around the ITCZ due to that low pressure and obviously high rainfall and high temperatures. Then we also have rainfall in these areas here. So this is at around 60 degrees latitude, and these areas also have low pressure. And the reason for that is that they are getting cold air from the polar regions and warmer air coming from the tropics. And when those two air masses meet, the warm air rises above the cold air. And as that happens, low pressure is created, which then causes clouds to form like they formed here, and that cloud formation then gives you rainfall, and you get the temperate forests in that particular area there. Okay, so high pressure areas on the other hand have low rainfall, and that will restrict tree growth. And at the boundaries of the cells in these areas, or in such areas, we find deserts and then grasslands in between them. So as you can see here, we have a desert here, we have a desert biome here, and another desert biome here in the southern hemisphere. And that's because it's a high pressure area, as you can see here, because the air here is sinking. And the sinking air obviously is not going to yield any cloud formation and therefore no rainfall. And so it's very dry, and those dry conditions are not suitable for a forest to thrive. And then in between, as you can see here, we have the tropical grasslands here, and tropical grasslands as well in the southern hemisphere. And then further on, again in the area in between the high and low pressure areas, we have temperate grasslands in the southern hemisphere and temperate grasslands in the northern hemisphere. Okay. So as we have seen on the last slide, latitude has a big role to play globally in determining where the Earth's biomes are found. So the next thing we are going to be looking at here is the local factors that influence biomes. So these are more local, so they are specific to places that are within a smaller area. And the first local factor that we'll be talking about here is the permeability of the soils. Now we know that permeability refers to how how much water can actually infiltrate those soils. So the soils are permeable if they allow water to infiltrate them, but we also have soils that do not necessarily allow that much water to infiltrate them, and those ones are referred to as impermeable soils. Now the ones that do not allow a lot of water to infiltrate through them end up being waterlogged or saturated. And in such kinds of environments, we have trees like the willow and the alder tree that that thrive in those waterlogged or marshy conditions. And so we are going to find those types of trees locally in those kinds of conditions where the soils are waterlogged. Then we have a second local factor, which is rock and soil type. Now, in the process of rocks breaking down during chemical weathering, nutrients and chemicals are released from the soil. The soils consequently will be alkaline, acidic, or neutral, depending on what rocks which rocks have experienced weathering in the area, and that will determine what types of trees can grow there. So in the UK, for example, beech and ash trees grow in alkaline areas, while oak grows in slightly acidic soils. Then the next one here, that is a local factor that will influence where we find biomes or different types of biomes, is altitude. And altitude is the height above sea level. Now, this affects temperature or the temperature of a place. And we know that for every 1,000 meters we go up towards into the atmosphere, we are losing 6.5 degrees Celsius in temperature. So this also affects the type of forest that can grow in those areas. And as we can see here on the diagram on the left, the tropical rainforest will grow at the lowest latitudes, as you can see here. So they are below 1,200 meters above sea level. And then that is followed by deciduous forests, which are around 1,200 to 2,400 meters above sea level. Then after that, we have the coniferous or evergreen forests, which is above that, between 2,400 and around 3,600 meters above sea level. Now, trees cannot grow beyond the tree line that we can see here because it's extremely cold above there, above that particular point, and therefore obviously the conditions are not suitable for forests to continue to grow there. Now, this kind of arrangement here that we have due to the different altitude that there is referred to as altitudinal zonation, and that's a very important key term for you to know for your examination. So altitudinal zonation, and that is how forests are arranged in line with altitude in an area. So the next thing that our specification requires us to know is the interaction between biotic and abiotic factors within the biome. So biomes have a living part, which is the biotic part, and then a non-living part, which is the abiotic. Now, the abiotic part includes the sun, the atmosphere, water, rock, and the soil. And the biotic and abiotic interact with each other all the time. So let's start off with, we've got a summary here, and we'll start off with the sun's energy. Now, as we've said, that the sun is the abiotic part, and the sun's energy is taken by the plants. Now, those plants then use, and plants obviously are the biotic. So sun abiotic, plants biotic, and they're interacting because the sun's energy is being taken in by the plants to make carbohydrates through the process of photosynthesis. And those carbohydrates obviously are what those plants need to grow. So the sun is helping the plants to grow and to thrive. Then secondly, we have animals that are taking in oxygen from the atmosphere and giving off carbon dioxide. So animals, biotic, carbon dioxide, abiotic, being given off into the atmosphere. Well, the atmosphere is abiotic, and the carbon dioxide is given off into the atmosphere, which is abiotic. The trees then, now again, biotic, taking the carbon dioxide and convert it into oxygen. And that regulates the atmosphere and keeps the temperatures within acceptable levels. Then thirdly here, we have the herbivores. So these herbivores then consume the plants that have been using the sun's energy for the process of photosynthesis to make their own food and to thrive. Then obviously, the herbivores then are eaten by, they then eat those plants, they consume the plants, and the energy within those plants is transferred to them to help them to grow. Then the herbivores themselves are then consumed by carnivores. And when these plants and animals eventually die, they are broken down by the detritivores, or sometimes they are referred to as detrivores, and decomposes, and they end up as nutrients in the soil. So you can see here that there has been a transfer of nutrients and carbon between the sun and the plants, and then now the animals, and eventually we have carbon as well being transferred into the soil. So there's interaction between the biotic and the abiotic all the time. So let's go on to the fourth one, and this is the rocks. So the rocks are broken down into the soil by weathering processes. So we know weathering processes such as biological weathering, chemical weathering, and freeze thaw weathering or physical weathering. So when those rocks are broken down into the soil by the weathering processes, they also add nutrients into the soil. Okay. Then fifth here, we have plants using the nutrients from the rocks. So the rocks obviously are abiotic, and now the plants are using those nutrients from those rocks, plants being biotic now, and decomposed plants as well of animals and plants from the soil to help them grow. Okay, so nutrients within the soil come from both the rocks and from the remains of dead plants and animals, and those again are used by the plants to grow. Then sixth here, we have rain from the atmosphere that then is used to facilitate the growth of plants, and then by the animals as well, because they'll drink the water. Animals have water within them. It also infiltrates the soil, as in the rainfall, and is stored in the soil as soil moisture or groundwater after percolation has taken place. Then the last one here that we'll be talking about is that some of the water is transferred back into the atmosphere by the plants as transpiration. And then animals as well will perspire, and the ground will also release water vapor through evaporation. Now, if we have a combination of water from the ground and from the plants, it's called evapotranspiration. But when it's separate from the plants are losing water vapor through their leaves, and that process is transpiration. And then we have evaporation as the water is heated by the sun and it's evaporating and going back into the atmosphere, and then the animals again are perspiring and giving off that water vapor. So how are biomes a life support system? So biomes are not only important for providing goods and services to humans, but they also regulate other physical systems and keep the planet healthy. Now, there are 4 services that the biomes offer. And the first one here is provisioning of goods and services. Now, those goods and services that are provided by the biomes are both for the indigenous tribes that live within those forest biomes, and also for people all over the world. Now, in terms of the indigenous tribes, they get their food from the forests. So they get fish, they get bushmeat, wild yams, nuts, berries, wild honey, and so on for their food. And then they also get wood and leaves for building houses and for firewood. So we know that a lot of these indigenous tribes live in very remote places or areas, and therefore they do not have electricity, and they have to rely on the firewood from those forests for their for cooking and for their heating as well. Then what about people all over the world then? They are relying on these biomes here for timber, and that timber is being used for construction. There's also the aloe vera plant, which is used for cosmetics that are used across the world. We have periwinkle that is used for leukemia, which is a form of cancer. And then we have biofuels, we have wood for paper, and also poppies to make morphine. Okay, so that's how the biomes act as a life support system in providing goods and services for people all over the world. Okay, then secondly, we have supporting services, and the first one here is photosynthesis and the food webs. Now, the biomes obviously as this, they support the food chain through the transfers of energy that we talked about in the previous slide. So we said in the previous slide that the sun is the main source of energy. Then the plants use that energy to make their food, to make the carbohydrates, and that enables the plants to grow. And as the plants grow, they then provide food for the herbivores. Then the herbivores provide food for the carnivores, and so on. So in so doing, the biome is actually supporting that food web or food chain within that particular ecosystem, and there are transfers of energy within that particular system. Then we have soil formation. So weathering processes like chemical and biological weathering are actually taking place within the forests, and that is making soil. And that soil is then supporting the trees and helping them to grow. And like we said previously, the chemical and biological weathering releases nutrients into the soil as well, and those nutrients are then being used by the plants to help them to grow and to thrive. Then lastly, we have nutrient cycling here. And when the biotic part dies, so the living the plants and the animals, when they die, they fall obviously to the forest floor, and they add nutrients back to the soil, and that will further support plant growth. So what is the third way then that the biome acts as a life support system? We have regulating services here, and this relates to 2 physical systems that keep the planet healthy. The first one is the carbon cycle. Now, this is really important to remember here, that the forests are carbon sinks. So they take in carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. and in so doing they keep the atmosphere and the temperature in balance. We know that if we have too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, that will cause, and especially if it's human created, or the source is human beings, so through industry, through transport and so on, if we have a lot of that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it leads to the enhanced greenhouse gas effect, which then leads to global warming. But then when we have trees, they will regulate the temperatures, because they are going to be taking that carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and therefore reducing global warming. In fact, the tropical rainforest has actually been referred to as the lungs of the earth. Okay, then the next one here is the water cycle. So trees purify, and they are doing through the roots, and then out through transpiration. They purify and regulate the flow of water within the cycle. So no trees means that there will be flooding and desertification. So how will there be flooding if there are no trees? So what we are saying is that if you cut down the trees, or if you have no trees, it means that there will be no interception. And that will mean that the water will reach the ground very quickly. And if it reaches the ground quickly, there won't be sufficient time for that water then to infiltrate the soil. And because limited infiltration is taking place, then you have more surface runoff, and that surface runoff leads to flooding. So the trees obviously then are providing a regulating service for the water cycle, because they are keeping it in check and in balance, such that we do not have flooding taking place. What about desertification then? If we cut down the trees, what will happen is that the soil will be left exposed. Now we know that the trees, the roots of the trees normally hold the soil together. But if you cut down the trees, that is no longer happening. So the soil is first of all left exposed to the sun and to the wind and to rainfall, so water. So it's likely to get eroded as a result of that. And especially now that there are no roots in the soil, it means that the particles of the soil are very loose, and therefore can be carried away either by wind or water. Right, so that obviously, the trees are providing cover for the soil, and without them, then this desertification will take place, because the nutrients, as that erosion is taking place. So let's take as an example the water erosion, that erosion by water rather. So that erosion is going to cause the nutrients that are in the soil to be washed away. That process is called leaching. And when that happens, the soil becomes infertile, and that is likely to lead to desertification. Now, the other thing we also need to think about is that the exposed soil is also exposed to the sun. So because it's exposed to the sun, it's likely to dry out quite quickly. And if it's dry, it becomes quite hard, and therefore not very good for plant growth. And again, that leads to desertification. Okay, so moving on to the fourth service here. These here are cultural services. And these are benefits that people get from visiting or living in a healthy biome. So examples here include education, science, recreation, and tourism. And in this particular case, we could actually add ecotourism, as well as spiritual well-being. So yes, the biome is a very important life support system. It provides goods and services, provides supporting services, provides regulating services, and also provides cultural services. So on this slide, we'll be talking about exploiting versus destroying ecosystem services. Now, slash and burn farming and crop rotation are sustainable ways of exploiting the forests. They are farming practices used by 500 million in the world, million people in the world, and the farmers normally farm small plots of land over 5 to 6 years. They slash and burn the trees to clear the land, and the ash from the trees adds nutrients to the soil. So those nutrients then help their crops to grow. And then eventually, after 5 to 6 years, those soils become infertile because the nutrients have now all been used up, or have now been used up by the crops that were being grown on the soils. So these farmers will then move to a new plot of land and do the same. They slash and burn again. And then after that piece of land as well loses its nutrients, they move to a new piece of land. Now, when they rotate like that, it will allow the old plots of land to recover their nutrients and to regrow. So that type of farming, or this type of farming of slash and burn, as well as crop rotation, is a sustainable way of exploiting the rainforest, because it's allowing for the soils to time for the soils to recover. Okay, now moving on to destroying ecosystem services. Now, as we can see here on the graph, the destruction of biomes is uneven across the world. Okay, so the destruction is shown by the orange color here, as you can see from the key, and then the green is what is remaining. And we can see here that the one that has been destroyed the most and with the highest percentage is the temperate forest over here, which is at 72% destruction, which is really, really high. So we have very little of this forest remaining, okay, as in the temperate forest. Now, the lowest, so that's the highest, and then the lowest here is the taiga, which is here at around 5%. Now, it could be argued that the countries in the higher latitudes where the temperate forests are found have grown and have urbanized rapidly. Okay, now the temperate forests obviously are found within the temperate climate, and that is in the mid latitudes. For example, the UK is around this area, so mid latitudes, that's around 58 to 60 degrees north of the equator. Now, we can also argue that a lot of the countries that are within that latitude or on that latitude are HICs. And HICs have been the first group of countries to urbanize and to industrialize. Now, as a result of that urbanization, there has been a great demand for wood. So the wood obviously is being used for construction, it's being used for paper, and it's being used for other different services and uses. And as a result of that, there has been rapid exploitation of those temperate forests that are found within these regions. We could also argue as well that for that urbanization and development to take place, you're also required, the countries within those particular latitudes are also having to cut down the forest biome in order to get space for the buildings and the infrastructure to support it, such as roads and railway lines and so on. So all that is leading to the exploitation of the forest. Then we have the countries where the tropical forests are found. Now, those countries, we could argue, you see, the tropical forests here, the exploitation is not as much actually as we would expect it would be, right? And one of the reasons is probably the slash and burn and crop rotation that we talked about, but then also only 48% of those countries, 48% of those countries is rural, right? So that means that they are yet to urbanize, and therefore they are not as urbanized. So the demand for wood is not as high. Okay, so that could be the argument in terms of why the exploitation has not been that much. And then they also cover very large expanses of land as well. So that could be another argument as well. So the taiga areas or taiga areas have a small population. So that's here. and this is where the exploitation is at the least percentage. So that's 5%, right? And they have a very small population due to the very low temperatures. Okay, and as a result of that, obviously the exploitation and the development of those areas is not as much. Okay, so in the temperate rainforest areas, the main issue is commercial exploitation of large areas of forests by TNCs. Now, we talked about provisioning of services by the rainforests, and we talked about the services that are likely to be gotten from the forests, right? So we talked about aloe vera, we talked about wood for timber and so on. And if it's TNCs that are exploiting them, transnational corporations, we know that they will require a lot of wood, and as a result of that, they are destroying very large areas of forest or land. They clear the land for ranching as well. Ranching, which is the keeping of cattle for beef. Now that obviously takes up a lot of land. They also clear the land for dams, for hydroelectric power, where we have rivers flowing through these forest biomes, for timber, and then they also clear the land for mining. So they clear the land of the trees, they cut down the trees so that they can access any minerals that are within these areas. Then they also use it for arable farming. So they clear the forests and then they grow crops on them. And therefore, these TNCs are actually a big threat to the forests, because once it's cleared, it's very difficult for it to regrow. So why is there a rising demand for resources? So natural resources are materials found in the natural environment and that are used by humans. So examples here include fossil fuels, so coal, oil, and gas, water, timber, and fish, right? So those are just examples. And there are three main reasons why the demand for these natural resources is on the rise. And the first one is a rising global population. So this means that there is demand in four main areas. And as the population rises, there'll be a demand for more food. And more people, obviously, needing more food will require for some of the forest to be cut down or cleared for farming. And that farming, especially ranching, is causing the forest to be cleared, to a large extent. Okay, and then we have energy. The demand for energy means that there is a need for fossil fuels. Now, forests need to be cleared in order for these fossil fuels, such as coal, oil, and gas, to be mined. And then we also need to clear forests, or they're also being cleared as well, for hydroelectric power stations. Okay, so rising population, meaning demand for food, energy, and then the next thing is industry. Now, as the population of the world increases, we need goods to supply to those that increasing number of people, and those goods need to be manufactured. And for the goods to be manufactured, it means that you will need more raw materials, and a lot of those raw materials are natural resources, and those again are going to be extracted from forest biomes, and will require for those forests to be cleared or cut down in order to access them. Then lastly, we have the demand for transport as it rises due to population increase. And that means there are more cars on the road, and those cars need fuel to power them. And obviously, that fuel, some of the fuel is coming, like the oil is coming from the forests, and the forests are having to be cleared in order for that oil to be accessed. Then we have rising affluence. Okay, as another reason why there is a rising demand for resources. Now, the average global income has gone up by 4.4 times between 1950 and 2018. So it was $3,300 in 1950, and now it's at around, well, in 2018 it was at 15,200. So clearly it's gone up quite significantly. And a wealthier population will use far more energy as they have far more electronic products. Now, if we look at a lot of the HICs, they do have a lot of electronic products. If you think about you've got several devices in the house. You've got maybe several laptops, one or two laptops anyway, or several of them. You have a desktop, and you've got a lot of electronic products. You've got an iPhone, or whatever type of phone you have, right? So all these are electronics, and those ones need to be produced as well. That obviously is leading to the destruction of the forest biomes as it takes place. Then we have white goods as well in HICs as well, especially. So these also require raw materials in their manufacturing. So white goods here, we are actually referring to things in the house that you use, such as a microwave is a form of a white good. We have the dishwasher, the washing machine, the dryer, and so on. All those require to be manufactured, and that manufacturing process requires raw materials, which are likely to be found in the forest biomes. Then as incomes rise, people tend to eat more meat, fat, and dairy products. And that means a lot more cattle farming will be needed. So the ranching that we are talking about in the forests is going to take place, and the forests are going to be cleared. Then the third reason here we are talking about in terms of a rising demand for resources is increasing urbanization. Now, the most rapidly urbanizing continents at the moment are Asia and Africa. Again, rapid urbanization means rising demand from energy, industry, and transport. And this obviously leads to more natural resources being extracted. Now, urbanization as well will lead to air and river pollution. So air pollution leads to acid rain. And these also have an impact on the wider environment, including the biomes. Okay, so who is right in the population versus resource theories? It has been argued that by 2030, the world will be running out of resources. This has been described as the perfect storm, where the available resources will not be sufficient to support the resident population. So there are two views that have been put forward to suggest what is likely to happen. And the first one is the Malthusian view. So Thomas Malthus' view was that the population will grow to the point where it outstrips the food supply. So in other words, the population will grow too fast for the food supply to keep up. So there will be a shortage of food. He said that this would lead to a crisis and population would fall as a result. And that would be mainly due to wars, starvation, and famine. Now, this is a negative or pessimistic view and is shown on the graph here by the blue line. Okay, so that's a blue line there. And you also have a red line here that is showing the population growth. Now, you can see that initially it's growing fairly slowly. Then it gets to a point where it's growing exponentially. Now, he said that for a time, that population growth will be supported by the food supply or the resources that are available. And you can see that is what is happening until we get to this point here, which is what he refers to as a crisis point. And that is the point at which the population growth will outstrip the food supply as well as the resources that are available. And at that time, he said or suggested that the population would fall as a result of wars, obviously, like we said, famine and drought. Okay, famine and starvation, excuse me. And then we have a second view, which is the Bosrapian view. Now, this view was by Esther Bosrap, who was a Danish economist. So she suggested that as the population grows, humans will think of innovative ways to increase food production. Now, 5 of the new farming technologies that she suggested are shown on the graph that we have here, and her view is a positive view or an optimistic view, okay, and is shown here by the green line, okay. Now, some of the farming technologies, new farming technologies that she suggested are shown here, and we'll go through them one by one. So crop rotation, we had talked about this earlier, which is where you farm one piece of land, plot of land rather, for 5 to 6 years. Then after that 5 to 6 years, you move on to a new plot of land, and then you farm it for another 5 to 6 years. And at that time, you will be giving the first plot of land enough time to recover its nutrients and to regrow. So that is sustainable, and that will obviously help with food production. Then we also have irrigation, and irrigation is where we artificially water our crops. So instead of relying on the rainfall, like a lot of communities do, we artificially water those crops so as to increase food production. So that's another way of adapting to this increasing population. Okay. Then thirdly, we have farm machinery. So the use of farm machinery will make farming a lot more efficient. It will make it a lot faster and efficient, obviously, and you will be able to farm huge tracts of land and therefore grow a lot more food. And that will be a way of adapting to the population increase that is taking place. Then we have the use of fertilizers. Now, fertilizers are an artificial way of adding nutrients to the soil. So for example, you may have fertilizers that add ammonia to the soil, for example, and that will increase food production. And as that happens, you obviously will end up with enough food for this population that is rapidly growing. Then we have GM crops. These are genetically modified crops, and these types of crops are genetically modified such that they can grow in conditions that they would ordinarily not grow in. That obviously will mean a spike in food production again, and that is going to help with this rapidly increasing population. Okay, then we also have a third argument here, or a final part of the debate, and that final part of the debate is quality rather than quantity. So this one suggests that it will be a lower quality of the resources available and not the quantity that will lead to a crisis. So the examples that are being given here include water resources that are unusable due to pollution. Now we know that as the population increases, there's a lot more air pollution, there's a lot more water pollution. So here the suggestion is that the water available will be unusable due to that pollution. And then there will be infertile soils due to erosion. So because of cutting down trees and exposing the soils, there will be a lot more erosion, and the soils will be a lot more infertile, and therefore will not be able to support crop growth or plant growth. Okay, then oil and gas will also run out, and we will revert to using coal, which is dirtier, which is going to pollute a lot more, because we know that coal produces, out of the 3 fossil fuels, the coal is the one that produces the most carbon dioxide and emits it obviously into the atmosphere. So this here is a third layer to these arguments here that we have. Now, I'd like you to think about who you think here is correct. Do you think that the Bosrapian view is the one that is likely to play out, or is it the Malthusian view you think is likely to play out? That brings us to the end of the first topic for paper 3, People and the Biosphere. I hope that you have found this summary useful. I will be posting the other 2 topics soon, so look out for them. All the best with your revision, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.